Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendars, Astro Portraits. I'm Ralph D. Meachus, one of the calendar's astrologers. The portrait this week is John Legend. It is part of our series on musicians. John is a wonderful example because he spans between musicians and performers and producers. And that's something that's become more common as time has gone on. At one time, it was much more separated, but now that's much more common for people to move back and forth between the different skill sets. He is born on December 28th, 1978 at 8:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in Springfield, Ohio. He is a dyed-in-the-wool Capricorn. 6 degrees. He has Mars at 12 degrees. He has the rising at 12 degrees. So he has his Mars, his most physical, expressive self, conjunct within the degree of the rising. This is a person that has tremendous willingness to step out and do stuff. It makes him very physical, which is funny. You don't read that from him when you see him on television, but I bet when you deal with him personally, it's much more obvious. Though it's in Capricorn, so it's a little bit more reserved. He has the moon in Sagittarius. So already you have a tremendous number of planets on the eastern side of the chart. So this is a person who's very self-motivated. When you have that much by the rising, they're starters. We need people who are self-starters. Not only is he a self-starter, he'll get you started too. He's just that kind of driven person. He also has Pallas Athena, an asteroid that relates to high levels of skill at the rising. So this is someone who's very focused on developing his skill set. He keeps adding to his knowledge. In Capricorn, understanding how structures function. Capricorn is all about structures, the overall structure that guides our lives. Now, the moon is in the 12th house, but the moon is not alone. And the thing is, I don't think I've ever seen a picture of John Legend by himself. Because with this kind of chart, he isn't the kind of person who spends much time by himself. He always has people around him. In the 12th house, with his moon, he has at the same degree, at 18 degrees Sagittarius, Neptune. Now, this is really powerful. Neptune is a misunderstood planet, and we oftentimes relate it to Pisces, but it's not really a Piscean planet. It has a lot more to do with our ability to move beyond the physical, to think conceptually about the world. We relate it very strongly in terms of the physical world to things like natural gas, to the gases in our environment, things that flow easily between things, but also things that power things. Neptune is actually a very important success planet, and we find that when there's important aspects between Neptune and Jupiter, you find some tremendously successful people. And in his case, for instance, he has Neptune square his Saturn, and he's got Neptune kind of loosely trine his Jupiter. So he's got dynamics that really propelled him, made him want to move into the world of great success. He also has Mercury at 14 degrees, right? Which is a very fun position. This is someone who's a bit of a jokester. This is someone who likes puns and is playful and loves language, obviously. And he also has, it's a nodal point, and we don't use it all the time, but I'm mentioning it here. It's Selena. Selena is a nodal point, and it tends to bring great charm to any situation that arrives, and it's actually the first degree of Sagittarius. So this lineup of Selena, Mercury the jokester, Neptune the dreamer, the moon the nurturer, are all being led by this charming element. And he is a person of just tremendous charm. He's very, very likable. His restrained manner comes from the fact that he is a Capricorn, which is a restraint sign, and he has Capricorn rising. And Capricorn rising makes a person be very restrained. They're not overly expressive. They tend to be a bit formal. The Pallas Athena there, of course, is a whole other dynamic because he comes across under the surface. You get the feeling this is a person who's very skilled. His reticence, his reserve comes from a certain wisdom. Okay. Now it also comes back to the Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. So what is Saturn doing? Saturn is in Virgo, which is interesting, at 13 degrees Virgo retrograde, up in the ninth house, conjunct the North Node. Okay? The ninth house is about our higher knowledge, and by that I don't mean spiritual knowledge, though it does relate to religion. It relates to, for instance, higher education, professional skills. A person who, for instance, is an attorney or an accountant, or they'll have a very strong ninth house. It's about being a professional. Your work is based upon your knowledge. You know, the idea to get a great education is something that can never take you away from you. You especially hear about this in medicine and law. They can never take it away from you. It's your basic knowledge. Well, that's who supports this. And remember, the Saturn's at 13 degrees. The rising and the Mars are 12 degrees. That's an exact within 1 degree, a trine, a tremendously supportive quality. What's interesting, I really don't know much about John other than having heard his music and knowing that he's married and he has cute kids. Facebook. But Saturn retrograde, highly elevated like that, a lot of times means that for some reason there wasn't a father in his life, or his father traveled a great deal or was away from him. It's not really evident. So it makes a person create a father of them within themselves. Though in his case, it's very possible that he had very good teachers. Like he had very stern teachers, people who were very demanding of him, but he had fantastic teachers that were ambitious for him. Saturn, ninth house, Virgo. You know, Virgo is known for being picky, but it's not picky. It's just perfectionistic. They want you to do it correctly, and they want it to be done correctly for lots of Virgoan reasons. But that's a very supportive quality. And the thing about it is because the North Node is there, when he works on that, he gets great satisfaction from it. At the same time, we oftentimes say that the four most important points within the chart are actually the sun, right? The rising, the moon, and then the midheaven. This is especially true in people who have important careers, because the midheaven's like the flag above your castle. It says, this is what I do. His midheaven is in the 11th house. It's in the house of the community. For a producer, this is golden. Because a producer is all about, you create this community community of people who you work with. We find the artist, we find the other artists, the other musicians to work with them, we find the right music editor for them, we find people to do maybe remix, and you find the right marketing people, you find, all these different people you have to put together, you have to create the community. And what does he have in the 11th house, along with the midheaven in Scorpio? The sign of the perfect manager of shared resources, Venus in Scorpio and Uranus in Scorpio. Now, Venus in Scorpio is what's called the detriment position. Why? It's opposite the ruling sign of Taurus. So it's a personal position. This means on a personal level, he has great insights to other people. Also on a personal level, he's very good at managing people on a personal level. It's not as overt. It's more so interpersonal. It's more, you've come into my studio, now you're part of my family, and we're going to do it this way. And why? Because I just told you we're going to do it this way. And you don't ever have a chance to object because we're already doing it, aren't we? And everyone else is on board, and, it's just a really good talent. What's interesting is that he has Uranus conjunct the Venus. One thing we look for in people who are very famous is, where is Uranus? Uranus is the first planet beyond Saturn. Saturn is the furthest planet that we can normally see. Uranus can be seen at certain times, but it's very rare. So it relates in our lives to the first sections of our aura, just beyond the physical body. When you see like a sparkle in a person's eye and you realize it's not quite in their eye, it's around them. You're starting to see a little glow off their aura. That's where Uranus lives. That's the Uranian energy in the body. It gives people sparkle. It gives them sizzle. And a lot of times with very famous people, they have it right at the rising. Okay? They have it at the sun. They have it at the moon. That's typically where you find it. We just looked at the chart for Ariana Grande, who is tremendously successful, which is funny because I probably wouldn't recognize her music if I heard it, even though my wife has told me I've heard it many times. Probably some gap between her two charts. She has Uranus exactly on the rising. Exactly on the rising. And I can name a half dozen or a dozen different artists that have actors and musicians who have Uranus either right on the sun or on the ascendant or on the moon. Okay. Who was it? Adam Levine has it right on his moon. Okay. John Legend is kind of unique in that his is at his Venus. Okay. His Venus. Well, Venus, is the most social of the planets. Even more so in some ways than Mercury. Mercury can be it's very social, but it's also short attention span. It wants to talk with you, and 5 minutes later, it's off talking to somebody else. Venus wants to talk with you. And then they'll say, well, what do you want to drink? And then they'll say, well, what do you want to eat? It says, should go see a movie. It's truly social. They're there for the afternoon with you. Venus is there, and maybe let's see how the evening goes. Venus is a truly social energy. It's about, that part of our lives where we feel the need for deep connection with others. People who are not necessarily our child or our child or our parent. It's not lunar. It goes beyond that. It goes to those people who are not in that connection. It takes us beyond our family. So he has Venus conjunct Uranus, sizzle in the area of the community, and the 11th house is also where people tend to make money, and he has his midheaven there. That's why being a producer works so well for him. Because within that environment, he just really can manage that group well. He can get in that area and make people feel connected to him. And also remember, it's Venus, it's the arts. He understands the art, the management of the art of the group within that environment. Now, artists, generally speaking, and this is true with actors and musicians, have packed 12 houses. Why the 12th house? The 12th house in astrology is seen as a very weak house. It's, the place where you have retreated from the world. You've gone through the career in the 9th, 10th, and 11th houses, and now you retreat away to the 12th house, as you get ready to die. Not seen as a real strong house. But yet, with artists and musicians, the 12th house is packed. Famous movie directors, their whole charts in their 12th house practically. He has a very strong 12th house. The moon, Neptune, Mercury, Selena, and is part of fortune. His link to the physical world is in the 12th house. The 12th house is the protected space. It's the studio. It's the place where people go where they're protected from the world. Studios are generally soundproof. Studios don't have telephones that ring. Studios, they're protected from the world. It's a place where you can be creative and intuitive and make mistakes. And how many times have you practiced this thing and it hasn't come out right before you finally get it right? How many takes are we going to do of this damn song? Well, one more. Okay, Who was it? I forget what band it was that they would always bring musicians in. It was just the two of them. They brought musicians in for the times. And they would do like 60 takes. And people hated it. But what it was is they were trying to get them to do it so long that all of their own personal uniqueness of that musician's uniqueness would disappear. So that the music that they were producing was as true to the original score as possible without any of their personal little grace notes that they might add in as an artist. So they would just kind of beat the creativity out of them until they just got the music. Okay, and that's a weird way to do it. Normally speaking, you want people's grace notes. You want contributions. These days, a lot of songs, in fact, are actually written by teams of people. People come in and they all contribute their own individual nature. Years ago, it was very different. A single person would write the song and then they'd go in and try to craft it. Now it's very, very different how music is created. But he's really, with that 11th house and 12th house, he's a master of that world, of getting the group together and collectively crafting the art. This is what's really interesting. All of the planets are above the horizon. The rising is 12 degrees Capricorn. The descendant, the point opposite it, which typically lands in the 7th house, is 12 degrees Cancer. Coincidentally, within 1 degree of the brightest star in the sky, Sirius. So whoever he marries is going to be very, very special, right? But it means all the planets from Mars, the Sun, the Moon, Neptune, Mercury, Venus, Uranus, Pluto, Saturn, and finally Jupiter and Leo are above the horizon. His life is lived out in the open. Personal life? Oh, he has a personal life. That's not where things happen. All the stuff that really happens, even in his personal life, probably ends up on YouTube or on Facebook, or, he really lives his life out here. What you see is what you get. Okay? Because so many of the planets are on the eastern side of the chart, he's very self-motivated. But on the western side of the chart, you have Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, powerful planets, right? It means that in terms of his connections, he's very good. Remember, Jupiter and Saturn are like the big guys. These are the senior executives. These are the big people, the big players in the industry, especially Jupiter and Leo. Jupiter and Leo, that would be the big artists, the famous artists. Saturn and Virgo, that would be the serious money makers. They always say that when you get up to a certain level, all executives are basically bean counters. Well, Saturn and Virgo is pretty much the bean counter. He's very good at making partnerships with them. He understands them because that's essential to his personality. So he can make the connections with those people, but he's very self-motivated. This is a person who starts projects. Now, being a Capricorn, he may oftentimes get ideas from other people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he can recognize an idea and then start running with that. What's interesting is he has no planets in the 7th house, the 6th house, and the 5th house. He has Chiron, somehow wounding that relates to his creativity, somehow in there. It's a certain sensitivity. No planets in this 4th house, no planets in this 3rd house, right? And these are important, family houses. In the 2nd house, he's got 3 asteroids, Vesta, Sirius, and Juno. And then you've got the 1st house, right, which you have 2 different asteroids in there. But you go through all those houses, 2nd through 7th. This is like where the personal life happens. And these are empty, which means that, in truth, he has tremendous room on the personal side of his life for growth. His family, his spouse, his experience with that. It can just grow without resistance, you might say. But with the moon in the 12th house, he had a mother who was probably a dreamer. The Saturn, highly elevated like that, he had a father who somehow taught him, even if teaching him had to do with him having to seek out his own teachers. But the sun at the rising with the Mars, this is someone who came in very, very motivated to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish, and loves working with a group. He was custom made for the modern musical world of being in the studio, working with teams, producing, bringing together their group. So that's the chart of John Legend, a wonderful musician, wonderful producer, part of our musician series. Now, remember, we do these portraits every Tuesday, and you can find those at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube. And when you go there, please subscribe. And if you push that little bell, you'll also get reminded when the forecasts are uploaded, which we do those every Friday. And this way, you'll know what's going on. And if you don't have your calendar yet, your Planetary Calendar, you can still find those. We're still shipping those out even now in March, because people want to know what's going on, and you'll find those at planetarycalendar.com. So until next time, be well.